Hello. Hello, police. Yeah, what's the problem, sir? We just drove down our farm track. Yeah. Go and feed our pheasants. We come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it. Yeah. It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. And in this video, we take a look at 3 eyewitness accounts of gunshots being heard on the evening of December the 6th. Was this a murder, as we've been told all along, which happened just before 7 PM on December the 6th, 1995? Or are there statements out there which lend more credibility to the story of Billy Jasper? The following statement is from Stephen Rogers, dated the 13th of December, 1995. I live at 9 acres, Rettendon Common, Essex. I would describe my home as a detached dwelling with 3/4 of an acre of land containing 4 stables. We are in a valley surrounded by fields, situated to the west of the A130 and west of the Wheatsheaf Public House. At this time there are 3 horses and a foal in our stables. The foal is being weaned off its mother and therefore requires to be fed at all times of the day and night. I can say that it is not uncommon to hear gunshots during the day and early evening in this area, although I am not a shooting person and I do not possess a gun. During the evening of Wednesday the 6th of December 1995, I was working in our village hall where I finished at 22:45 hours, returning home by 2300. I then had a sandwich and 2 cans of beer before going out to the stable to feed the foal. I would estimate the time to be 23:45 hours. I have to mix the food, feed the animal and wait for the foal to finish, which normally takes around half an hour. On this occasion, I'd given the foal some food and given some attention to the other horses. I would estimate the time to be about midnight or a few minutes later. I was standing outside the stable when I heard a series of gunshots. These shots, I believe, came from a southerly direction. I walked to the fence at the rear of the stables trying to see where these shots could have come from. I saw nothing. Although it was cold and very late, if I had just heard 2 shots, I wouldn't have taken much notice. I would have thought it was someone out shooting rabbits. The gunshots I heard were more than 2 in number, and they were of rapid fire. A fusillade of shots. There was no pause to reload in between these shots, and they were rapid in succession. I couldn't say how many shots there were. I heard 2 shots, I expected the noise to stop, but it just continued. After these shots, I didn't hear anything else. I remained out at the stables for around 10 minutes before returning to my home. As I walked inside in the light of my hallway, I checked my wristwatch and the time was midnight. I didn't think any more about these gunshots until I heard people shooting in the area over the weekend. This prompted me to remember the unusual noise I had heard on Wednesday night, and I reported the matter to the police. Okay, so firstly, to talk about this particular statement, how feasible I believe this is, let's just bring up exactly where this 9 acres in Rettendon is located. You can see on the map here that it's just under, literally just under a mile away from 9 acres to where the Range Rover was situated down Workhouse Lane. Now, although you see the measurement there in kilometres, if you convert that into miles, you'll see that it's literally just a shade under a mile in length. Now, why that's of any real particular importance at all is the fact that when the ballistics experts were talking in court, they believed that the gunshots would have been audible for over a mile. Now, that sounds, incredible, doesn't it? The fact that you could hear it from over a mile away. But I think we also need to remember that we're looking at a very quiet evening, especially around this time of night. The snowfall, which was coming down intermittently throughout the evening. The roads would have been a lot less busy during this time if it was around midnight. So it would have been quite an eerily still, cold evening. What is also interesting about this statement is obviously the way in which this man describes what he's actually heard. The fact that he hasn't just heard 1 or 2 shots. he's heard a barrage of shots, a fusillade of shots being let off at around midnight on the evening of December the 6th. Now, even he mentions in his statement here that if he had heard one or two shots, he probably wouldn't have taken much notice. And this is something which is often brought up in the comment section to these videos. How could the person at Rettendon Hall not have heard the shots on the evening of December the 6th? How could the farmers at White House Farm not have heard the shots? How could any passing cars not have heard the shots? Any residents nearby? Simply, it's because in this area of countryside, shooting and hearing the sound of shooting was commonplace. Now, a lot of people find that hard to grasp. They find that concept hard to grasp. The fact that you could hear something and it really just not register that you've heard a particular sound because you're literally that used to hearing it. Now, to sort of deviate away from this story just for a few seconds, my nan actually lives, her back garden, I should say, backs on to the central line. So you hear trains going past every 3 or 4 minutes. You know, initially when you get there, you pay attention to them. You can hear the trains going past, you can see them, you hear the sound. But after, say, a few hours, you become so used to hearing it, you just don't take any notice of it. And I think that's what we're experiencing here when we look at some of the statements from local residents. They're so used to hearing this sound that it's nothing out of the ordinary. It's nothing that registers in their head as something unusual. Now, a few people will say, well, clearly Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were killed just before 7 p.m. as that's when their phones go out of action. That's when the phone calls stop coming. They stop answering their phone. They stop dialing people, etc., etc. And really that piece of evidence was used as kind of like a forensic key that they died at around 7 p.m. or just before, I should say. Now, although I can't go into hardly any detail regarding this, I believe that a new appeal or a ongoing appeal is focusing on these calls regarding Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. And there is some word or some rumour, I should say, that Pat Tate's phone was in use after 7 p.m. Now, I can't say that that is for sure as I haven't seen the documents myself, but I certainly believe that there's a little bit more to this than meets the eye. What I can say with a fair deal of certainty is that Essex Police have redacted a lot of the calls, or at least some of the calls, which Tucker, Tate and Rolfe received on December the 6th. Now, think of it from their perspective. They're trying to narrow down the calls which were made and received. They're trying to focus on Steele, Womes, Nichols, Tate, Tucker, Rolfe, the girlfriends of those involved. But by all accounts, there are some calls which were either made or received near 7 p.m. on the evening of December the 6th, which were redacted by the Essex Police. Now, that is the word that I am getting. As I say, I cannot confirm that, but that is what I have been told by a reliable source who is involved in this new appeal. Now, the reason that that statement is both applicable and interesting is the fact that it does tie in to some degree with Billy Jasper's version of events. The man who claims that he was the getaway driver that night, that he dropped off a single individual who climbed over a gate in Rectory Lane, or on Rectory Lane, I should say, and then returned sort of 30 minutes to 45 minutes later with, I think it was 3 kilos of cocaine, having killed Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. Now, we know in the Range Rover there was an empty head bag. Could that have been what they were carrying that night? Could this explain the gunshots which were heard at around midnight? Does it also tie in with the fact that the Range Rover was found frost-free on the morning of December the 7th? The next statement comes from Michael Strelly-Upton, dated the 10th of December 1995, where he states the following. I own and run Leppage's farm, situated at Rettendon Common, East Hanningfield Road. The farm is situated off the A130 main road. As part of my work, I deal with animals, and around 6 times a week I have cause to leave my farm and go and collect animal food. The place I go to collect the animal food is in North Woodham Bakeries, and I leave at around 19:30 hours to 19:45. On Wednesday, the 6th of the 12th, 95, I had to again go to North Woodham Bakeries to collect food for the animals. I recall having my evening meal that day at around 1900 hours, and after that I sorted out my vehicle to go and collect the food. I left in my Land Rover, index number CA27UKV, and went via a petrol station to fuel the vehicle and then on to North Woodham. The journey usually takes 20 minutes. However, on this occasion it took longer due to getting fuel and being delayed at the bakeries. However, I recall returning home to the farm at around 2100 to 21:30 hours, the exact time I cannot remember. It was around this time, whilst I was unloading the Land Rover, that I heard the sound of a rapid burst of gunfire coming from the area of Workhouse Lane. I was quite used to hearing gunfire coming from this area on Wednesdays, as this is a day that there are shoots in the fields and the surrounding area. However, I was quite surprised to hear the shots so late at night. I would describe the sound as either 2 or 3 shots being fired very closely together. Although I believe I heard the shots being fired at around 2100 to 21:30 hours when I had returned from the bakeries, it may have happened just before I left, at around 1930 to 1945 hours. I am able to remember this incident so well, as it was unusual to hear gunshots so late in the day. The shoots that occur on the Wednesday is clay pigeon shooting and runs the entire day until it gets dark. Now this is a very interesting statement, particularly when you get a bit further down into it. Now the reason I say that is because it's mentioned there, Wednesdays. Wednesday is the common day for shoots to occur at White House Farm and around the Workhouse Lane area. Now, he even says himself there, if he had heard these gunshots a bit earlier in the day, he wouldn't really have thought anything of it because this was the common day. Wednesday was the common day for shoots to occur in that area. And I guess that's what I mean in my previous videos about this crime being particularly well planned in a lot of ways. Have they even gone down to such a minute detail as to choose the exact day which was common for shoots to occur in that area? Did whoever committed this crime have some kind of link or connection with that shooting club? What is telling me this statement is that whoever did this crime potentially had at least the knowledge that these gun shoots would take place on a Wednesday, the perfect day to commit a triple murder, the perfect day for these gunshots to blend in with the surrounding area. Interestingly, there was due to be a late evening, or I should say a late afternoon shoot at White House Farm on the afternoon of December the 6th, but this was for some reason cancelled. I remember reading a statement saying that they did shoot into the darkness, how they were able to do that was that they used floodlights. They used some kind of lighting outdoors in order for shoots to take place into the late afternoon. But for some reason on December the 6th, that shoot was cancelled. Now, I've just pulled up the statement from William Theobald, the brother of Peter Theobald, the farmer who discovered the bodies of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. And it's in his statement that he states the following: I currently only shoot on a Wednesday up until around 18:30 hours. On Wednesday the 6th of the 12th 95, the shooting stopped when it became too dark. I estimate the last shots were fired at around 15:45 hours. I do have lighting facilities to allow us to shoot after dark, but on the above date it was getting cold and the last visitor had an interest in our lakes, so we went to discuss my pond which is beside my home. So that's interesting there. Just to have a picture of that in your mind. There were people there shooting just a few hundred yards from where the Range Rover was discovered, just a couple of hours potentially before Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were murdered, 2 or 3 hours before this triple murder took place. That's quite, not odd, but it's quite a sort of eerie thing to actually think about. The final statement comes from David Gibbons, dated the 10th of December 1995, where he states the following: I reside at the address given with my family. I own an upholstery business which is situated at Old Hall Farm, The Barns, A130 at Rettendon, Essex. The premises consist of a breeze block type construction. There are no windows in the building, but there is a main door 6'6" by 8. This building is about 50 yards from the main A130 road. It is about the same distance to where the police have sealed the entrance to a small lane recently. On Wednesday, the 6th of the 12th 95, I was at work in company with my wife Sarah. I had started work at 7 AM. My wife joined me later in the day. I'm not sure of the exact time, but it was late afternoon or early evening when I heard the sound of gunshots. My wife had just gone out to fill some water containers from a nearby tap. The door of my building was closed at this time, and as she opened the door on her return, I heard 3 shots in quick succession. I remarked to my wife saying, "It's a bit late for shooting." I didn't take any notice of this and I carried on working. I think the time of the shots may have been around 1800 hours. I say this because I was buttoning settees. I normally take around 2 hours to do each settee. I was on my 3rd one, and having started doing this around midday, I can only put the time as around that period. It's not uncommon to hear gunshots in that area, because there is a clay shoot and also quite a few individuals shoot game in the area. I do not recall seeing anyone in the area of the barn, and I can say that apart from my wife and I, there were no other people working there. My wife and I are the only people that use the barns, apart from the landlord David O'Callaghan of Ivanhurst Limited, South Woodham Ferrers. Okay, so certainly a very interesting statement there, and one which I guess really could tie in with the official supposed version of events for the evening of December the 6th. Now, the reason I say that is because this guy is quite vague in his timings here. He's really just going by how long it usually takes him to do his work or complete his work. So could it be that it wasn't actually 6 PM that he hears these shots, but more like 6:45 or just before 7 PM? I think that's actually quite likely. What's also worthy of mention is the fact that this guy appears to be situated quite close to Workhouse Lane. This is really the only statement that I've read to you out of these 3 which could tie in with, as I say, the official supposed version of events for the evening of December the 6th. Many thanks for joining me for today's video. Shortly when the outro starts, you'll be able to see some other videos from the channel and also the Essex Boys playlist, which has all of the videos concerning this case in one convenient folder. Thanks so much for joining me for today's video. I look forward to seeing you again in the next one. Take care. Cheers.